We all know the Khaenri'ahns, right? They can certainly be unique. But what if they aren't just unique, but also original? What if they are the only original humans of Teyvat? And what if everyone else is an alien? If you read Before Sun and Moon and then take a good hard look at Teyvat, you will realize that something isn't quite adding up. The stone tablet tells us that the Primordial One is the ultimate creator, responsible for creating the Teyvat we know, with all of its beasts of the land, air and sea, as well as humanity. But this claim has already been challenged by the dragons. Teyvat already existed long before Khaenri'ahns arrived, and it was already teeming with life, born of the Primordial Sea. And even though we are specifically told that the Primordial One spent a long time preparing the world for the coming of their favorite creation, humankind, even their authorship can be debated, as Fontaine's Glider tells us it was only the Shade of Life who used the Primordial Sea to create the first humans. Turns out Khaenri'ahns is just that one group member who does not contribute to the project at all, but still signs their name on it. We all know one of those, and if you don't, you are the problem. This tells us that Before Sun and Moon's account is not completely accurate, but it's not necessarily wrong either. Khaenri'ahns did defeat the Dragon Sovereigns and went on to use their authorities to change Teyvat, creating a new order. And whether it was them or a Shade who made humans, at the end of the day, humanity still Celestia's creation, a fact that has been confirmed by Apep, Nouvelette and even Silas, as the dragons and bishops consider humans to be the children of the usurpers who stole Teyvat from them. But these discrepancies are not the only thing that puts Before Sun and Moon at odds with the Teyvat we know. This tale is Teyvat's creation myth, a creationist tale. Creationism is the belief that everything in the universe, life forms included, were created by God out of nothing, and they were created exactly as they are now, which makes creationism incompatible with evolution. So, according to Before Sun and Moon, evolution does not exist in Teyvat. But all you have to do is look around to realize that couldn't be further from the truth. Evolution is not only mentioned many times in game, but you can also literally see it. In the chasm, you can find several fossils. But these aren't just any fossils. These are trilobites. Genshin has a lot of fantasy creatures, but they are nonetheless based on actual real-life animals, most of which are still around to this day. Extinct animals aren't as well represented, and trilobites aren't an exception. There is no living Genshin animal that resembles these life forms, and for a very good reason. You see, trilobites are one of the oldest animals on Earth. Their very existence is proof of evolution, and the fact that they exist in Genshin indicates that Teyvat went through a timeline more or less similar to the timeline of our own Earth, with its life forms having undergone a similar evolutionary process. And like I said, evolution has also been mentioned multiple times. The Guardian of Apep's Oasis has the title Evolved from an Apocalyptic Millennium before its revival. Also, one of its boss drops is called Worldspan Fern, and its description states that ferns were the first plants to sprout in Apep's court, having gone on to become trees, vines, roots, and leaves. In other words, these ferns evolved into higher plants. On top of that, Apep and its guardian changed colors after their rainforest got turned into a desert by the Celestial Nail, which allowed them to better adapt to the environment. Similarly, the elemental life forms that were born inside of Apep also possess a remarkable adaptation capacity, being able to change their form at will. Evolution's ultimate goal is to allow a species to better adapt to the environment and survive, which is clearly what is going on here. Fontaine's Glider also mentions evolution. It states that, originally, the life that existed in the Primordial Sea was not individual, and that, in order for it to conquer the land and the air, it first had to evolve blood vessels. And then there is our most recent mention of evolution. The story narrated in Liobranto Inamurato is said to have taken place so long ago that back then birds had not yet split into domestic and wild kindreds. That's a pretty neat way to tie Khaenri'ah and evolution together, if you ask me. So, despite what Before Sun and Moon claims, evolution is very much real in Teyvat. Well, it is real for most species, that is. Like I said, we do know that humans were made by Celestia, but what if that isn't the case for all of them? Thanks to Liobranto Inamurato, we now know that the Curse of the Wilderness, the one that turns people into hilichurls, has been around at least since the Arkan War. This curse befell all those who forsook their gods, but because Celestia is apparently really petty, it did not stop there. Instead of simply cursing these sinners, they decided to curse their children too. This forced those who had abandoned their gods to seek refuge in Khaenri'ah, which, as Dainsleif puts it, is a hidden corner where the god's gaze does not fall. Essentially, Khaenri'ah is one big blind spot for Celestia. Once in the underground nation, these cursed individuals could never leave again, because as soon as they set foot outside of Khaenri'ahn soil, they would be turned into mindless monsters. But that's really weird, because the pure-blood Khaenri'ahns were able to live as they pleased without suffering any consequences. Their curse only befell them during the Cataclysm, and even then they were cursed with immortality instead of being turned into hilichurls. Now, it's not like everyone in Teyvat was cursed. The people of the Seven who never turned their backs on their gods remained curse-free, and the Khaenri'ahns never had a god to begin with, so it's not like they could forsake them, right? Well, the problem is that if you assume that Celestia created humanity, that would mean that all humans have a god. During the time of the unified civilization, the celestial gods and their envoys fulfilled the role that the Archons play today. We are even told that the Primordial One made some kind of covenant with humanity. They were the gods of that civilization. I find it hard to believe there would be no consequences for forsaking Celestia. But the Khaenri'ahns claim to be a godless nation, so they must have turned their back on them at some point. And because the curse of the wilderness affects the children of the sinners, that means that the pure-blood descendants of those first Khaenri'ahns who turned their back on Celestia should suffer the consequences of their parents' actions once they left the underground nation. But they never did. Leo Brandt in Amurato tells us that some Khaenri'ahns were allowed to leave the kingdom on official business. A party of diplomats was even sent to Enkanomiya to try and steal before Sun and Moon, and yet they were not cursed. Why is that? Well, what if the Khaenri'ahns were never created by Celestia in the first place? The reason why they were trying to steal before Sun and Moon was because they wanted to prove that the celestial gods were aliens. But here's the thing, it's not only Celestia that is alien to Teyvat. Most of their creations are too. Fontaine's glider tells us that the Shade of Life created Enjou from the Primordial Sea, but that, despite her having been created by a ruler of humans, her substance and essence were all original matter from Teyvat, entirely without outside elements. Which tells us that, by contrast, the humans made by Celestia have alien elements in their composition. They too are aliens. So, given that the Khaenri'ahns wanted to prove that Celestia was full of aliens, that means that they viewed themselves as separate from these gods and their creations. They consider themselves to be teyvatians. It's entirely possible that the Khaenri'ahns were already in Teyvat when the celestial gods arrived. While the people of the Seven were created by the gods, the Khaenri'ahns may be the result of Teyvat's natural evolution, the only real Teyvatian humans. This is actually supported by something Enjou said when he was explaining why Khaenri'ah wanted to get their hands on before Sun and Moon. He claimed that, before the times chronicled by the stone tablets, the whole land belonged to a single civilization and that no gods walked the earth. This conflicts with most of the information that we have been given, which suggests that unified civilization was created by Celestia. Paimon says as much, claiming that, according to the bards, there wasn't a time before the gods. Now that we know not to be true, and so does Enjou. There is also Dainsleif's narration of the collected miscellanies. He makes it very clear he has no love for the gods, but when it comes to nouveau lads, he actually compliments him, stating that his judgment is fair and that the innocent have nothing to fear. And then, in the same breath, he badmouths the gods. Here, I'll let you hear it from the man himself.
From Neuvillete's position, every conflict in Teyvat must seem like a comedy acted upon a stage. Fighting for territory that doesn't belong to them, singing the praises of overlords who imprison them, and committing sins that will long outlive them. Still, he does not seem to be an unfeeling spectator at all. In fact, he even tries to understand the causes behind this state of affairs. I rarely see such people, but lest you condemn me as ignorant or a loner for making such a statement, I should remind you that there is only one Iudex of Fontaine in this world.
Fighting for territory that doesn't belong to them. He is talking about disputes between humans, mind you. The dragons call the celestial gods usurpers because they stole Teyvat from them. Most of them are also not fond of humans because they view them as Celestia's creation, who inherited the land stolen by their gods. But this is Dainsleif talking, meaning that he shares the dragon's point of view. The way he sees it, the gods and their people alike are living in stolen land. Land that probably used to belong not only to the dragons, but also his ancestors. And the final nail in the coffin is Khaenri'ah's other name, Dari. This is a name that the people of Sumeru used to give the Underground Kingdom long ago, but the term is still used by the Vahumana Darshan to this day. Dari is a term that is usually used to refer to an atheist, someone who rejects the existence of any god and who believes that the universe exists eternally. Now, the Khaenri'ahns definitely believe that the gods exist, and it's not like they question their divinity either. They simply wanted nothing to do with them. And when you put everything together, it seems that what they don't believe in is that Celestia created Teyvat and humanity. More specifically, they don't believe they were created by the gods. And you know what? I kinda agree with them. In my last video, I talked about the possibility that both twins are native to Teyvat, but not just any Teyvat, the original version of it. That would make them predate Celestia and would imply that humans, or at least humanoids, as we still aren't sure what the twins are, had to have existed in this world before the Primordial One ever arrived. The Khaenri'ahns could very well be the descendants of that ancient civilization the twins belonged to. And it would give us yet another reason for the people of the Underground Kingdom to have promptly made a sibling their prince or princess. Lumine's character card states that she should own her world and rule its people. If she is the ancestor of the Khaenri'ahns, her being made princess would achieve just that. So, are the Khaenri'ahns the only humans native to Teyvat? That is for you to decide, at least until the game either proves or disproves this theory. This idea isn't new, mind you. There are several variants of it out there, and I will link in the description one of them that, despite being a few months old, is still resisting the test of time. But I think it seems more likely now than ever before, so I wanted to add my 2 cents as well as a new quote-unquote evidence. What are your thoughts on this? From a narrative standpoint, I think this could be a very satisfying plot twist if handled right. But that's all from me today. My name is Blue, and I'll see you again soon. Safe journey, travelers!